I'm sharing a very real and very tragic story that happened to an old friend of mine about a month ago. Since the investigation and court proceedings are still ongoing, I'll be using alternate names to protect the privacy of the victims involved. The reason I know so many intimate details about the event is because my coworker's fiance was one of the detectives who was assigned to the case. Small world, huh? For a brief backstory, I met the victim through a mutual friend who I'll call Mia. Mia and I became friends in college because we took several classes together. We don't share many common interests, but we have years worth of history, jokes, and common experiences, which have kept us connected over the past several years since we graduated. Mia was heavily into fetish art, which is one interest we did not bond over. No pun intended. If you're unfamiliar with fetish art, it's where somebody dresses up in BDSM clothing for photo shoots, performances, and/or conventions. From what I know, Mia wasn't into BDSM play, but rather the artistic expression and aesthetic. I don't understand the appeal, but I also don't judge her for it. To each their own. Back in college, Mia invited me to a university party where I first met the victim, who I'll call Bianca. When I first met Bianca, she was a stunning girl in her early 20s with an effervescent personality that only added to her glow. Bianca had this energy about her that immediately put everyone at ease, no matter the situation. I don't want to lean into stereotypes, but the prettiest girl in the room isn't typically the kindest or most welcoming, yet Bianca was all three. I learned that Bianca was also a member of the fetish art community, which is how she and Maya became friends. I ran into Bianca at a few more parties before we graduated, but we lost touch post-graduation. Maya and Bianca had remained good friends after college due to their involvement in the fetish art community, but Bianca had become very distant and reclusive over the past 7 months since she started dating her new boyfriend, who I'll call Griffin. Griffin was terribly possessive. He was controlling and emotionally and physically abusive. He would use BDSM as an excuse to abuse Bianca. But because Bianca wasn't allowed to communicate openly with her friends and family, no one knew how dangerous her situation had become. Flash forward to the present. I received a text from Mia on a Sunday asking if I remembered Bianca from college, which I confirmed. Mia then let me know that Bianca had been reported missing. Bianca and Griffin were supposed to attend an event together on Friday, but never showed up. Some of the event attendants tried to contact Bianca, but no one could reach her. Shortly thereafter, Bianca's phone's location had been mysteriously turned off. People called and got a hold of Griffin afterward, and he said he had no idea where Bianca was, and that he had been waiting for her to come home so the couple could head to the event together. Griffin's response was a major red flag since he always knew Bianca's location due to how controlling he was. Griffin would spy on and abuse her if she lied or tried to see her family without permission. He never allowed Bianca to go anywhere without him, so how would he suddenly not know where she was? Bianca's family was contacted very early Saturday morning and informed that Bianca had been missing since the night prior and suspected something terrible had happened. Since her family had to wait 48 hours from the time of her disappearance before filing a missing persons report, the police didn't start investigating until Sunday. That's when Mia texted me the news. The detectives immediately went to Griffin's apartment, but he refused to grant the police entry without a search warrant. For whatever reason, Griffin was under the impression that the detectives wouldn't be granted a warrant, which is pretty ridiculous considering he was the only suspect. Because Griffin assumed his interaction with the police was over, he didn't attempt to flee. Contrary to his assumption, the detectives easily got a warrant, returned to the apartment, and found Griffin half naked in the kitchen, wearing yellow rubber gloves and laying down a black tarp on the floor. Surrounding him were several tools, such as a bone saw, Lysol wipes, goggles, industrial tape, and vacuum-sealed plastic bags. Also in the kitchen, the detectives found a blood-soaked duffel bag that smelled like, and I quote, "the most vile and pungent mix of feces, decaying fish, sulfur, and sweat." The detectives immediately arrested Griffin for attempting to conceal the murder of another person, which later became a charge of first-degree murder. I'm sure you'd have guessed it by now, but Bianca's body was inside the bag alongside the bloodied ballistic knife, which Griffin purchased illegally. Bianca's head was decapitated, and her body was covered in various cuts, with shattered ribs and a broken trachea. If you're wondering why Griffin kept a dead body in his apartment for 3 days, I'll let you connect those disgusting dots on your own. Apparently, Bianca and Griffin had been engaging in BDSM play, and Griffin indulged in his deepest and darkest fantasies. Sadly, Bianca was on the receiving end of his evil. After Griffin's arrest, all of Bianca's friends and family discovered that Griffin was a registered sex offender and had already been incarcerated 8 times for sexual assault, drug and weapon charges, and aggravated assault in the span of 9 years. I look forward to knowing that Griffin will spend the rest of his life behind bars when he gets convicted of his senseless and lustful acts. Bianca was a beautiful and pure-hearted person whose murder could have been prevented if her friends and family noticed all of the red flags and acted to rescue her from her situation. I implore you, please pay attention to the behavior of your loved ones. Sometimes people can't vocalize their desperate need for help, but there may be behavioral clues instead. Also, please always remember to do a simple Google search or background check of your future partners before going in too deep to back out. If Bianca had simply looked up Griffin's name and history, she might have avoided such a gruesome and untimely death. I'm thankful that Bianca's beautiful light shined in my life, even though the duration was brief, and I hope her family finds the peace and justice that they deserve. Rest in peace, Bianca. I'm a 19-year-old female, and I've had this friend who is a 19-year-old male that I've known for many years but was never too close to. Recently, coming back from uni for the summer, when I had gotten home, I stayed with my parents. There isn't much to do in my hometown except for hang out with friends and smoke and drink, so that's exactly what I did. While hanging out with my friends, I ran into the guy, I'll call him Saf for the purpose of the story. Saf has always seemed like a chill guy, typical 19-year-old male who studies business, living off of daddy's money since he comes from a wealthy family. As soon as we reconnected, we developed a closer friendship. He started hosting at his house and my friends and I would go. When we smoked, he frequently brought up his fantasies of killing and eating someone. Of course, all of us being high would just laugh it off and considered it to be shock humor. However, he would never laugh while making these jokes. Now, my friends and I had agreed he was pretty creepy, but we chalked it up to just him being too high. That is, until I started hanging out with him alone. We have a pretty small friend group that hangs out nearly every day. Saf and I stay up pretty late after everyone's left until the sun comes up, which is how we got so close, because it would just be us at the end of the night and he would have to drive me home. On one of those nights, we were with a group of friends and decided that we would all take some edibles. For context, we were at Saf's house. 3 hours into it, when all of us were pretty gone, Saf starts going on a tangent about how it would feel to pluck someone's eyeballs out. He starts going into detail, and my other friend asked him to stop talking because it was making him uncomfortable. He always did this, but this time he went really into detail, explaining imagery and things like that. Someone quickly changed the subject and the night went on. About an hour later, my friend and I decided to look at the fridge for some munchies. As we look in the fridge for something to eat, I feel someone put their arm around my neck, and I feel something quite heavy putting pressure on it. And as I look down, I realize Saf is holding a knife to my neck and holding my other friend with his other free hand. "What are you guys doing?" he asks. Now, keep in mind, we were all very high. So I start laughing it off and going along with what I thought was a joke. As my friend and I answer him, I realize he still hasn't pulled the knife off my neck, and that he was in fact holding it closer, to the point where I started to cough. Thankfully, the knife was quite dull, but it was still a massive kitchen knife. As soon as I realized that he isn't letting go, I let out a scream. Nothing too loud or alarming. I was hoping that he would also assume that I was joking. He then lets go and walks away. The night goes on and we quickly forget about what happened. Saf offers to drive my friend and I home at the end of the night when everyone's left. My friend and I didn't have a car or money, so we accepted. On the drive home, we stopped at a red light. He made my friend get out and check if the car was damaged because he had seen someone bump it while driving. Neither my friend or I saw this, but my friend got out of the car anyway and checks. As he tries to open the back door to get in the car again, Saf locks it. The light has now turned green, and thank God it was only 5 a.m. because there were only 2 other cars around, but they all started beeping and swerving as to not hit the car or my friend. As my friend and I are yelling for him to open the door, he drives a couple inches forward, putting the tire on my friend's foot. He then unlocks the door and watches my friend yell at him for being trapped under there. I look over to Saf, and I see him hysterically laughing and putting the car in reverse for my friend to get in. Once we get back onto the road, he starts driving like crazy, which isn't unusual for Saf, but he was a lot more reckless that night and that morning. Now, before you all judge me for staying friends with such a weird and dangerous man, keep in mind, it had never been this bad before. He just said really weird shit every now and then, but I honestly thought it was just his intrusive thoughts winning. I struggle with mental health and have the most vile and weird intrusive thoughts, so I thought that was it. And as for the night that I mentioned, we were all really high on edibles, so although I was very weirded out, I thought he must have just been super high, and so I convinced myself that I was overreacting. On another night, we go to a party together. We then got back in the car for an after party, but on the way we realized that it had been canceled. Saf then asked me if I wanted to go back to his house, eat something, watch a movie, and smoke. It was still really early in the night, so I agreed, knowing I wouldn't be asleep for a while. We pull up, and he tells me to make myself comfortable and he's gonna cook us some pasta. Do you see where this is going? So, I sit down, I turn on a movie, and I wait. He comes back out with the pasta, and I eat almost all of it, and a few minutes into the movie, I start feeling very ill. I mention this to Saf, and he says it's probably just because I drink, but I only drank very little at the party, which also was around 3 hours ago at this point, and I haven't thrown up or felt nauseous from alcohol in years. As time goes on, I keep feeling worse and practically beg him to take me home. He refuses because he's in his house, which is understandable. However, this is the first time he's declined taking me home. At this point, I get a really bad feeling along with the sickness, and my body decided I had to get out of there. I thankfully had some money with me, so I ordered a cab and I went home. In the cab on the way home, I started vomiting out of the window because of how much pain my stomach was in. I get home and I just collapse, but I'm unable to fall asleep because of how much pain I'm still in, and then I start thinking about all the times he's mentioned the desire to kill someone and then eat them. He always talked about how he would eat a girl's thigh because he believes it would be the juiciest, and how he would only eat a girl and never a boy. Since that day, I've kept my distance, but I've been fighting with myself internally asking, did I get poisoned or did I just drink too much? Is he a psychopath or is he just a little weird? I truly don't know, so please, any advice is appreciated. And as I've mentioned, I've been friends with him for years and have developed a close relationship, and I do love him as a friend, just not enough to get eaten.